Novak Djokovic has been making headlines every other day, although perhaps not always for the right reasons. One of the recent major talking points for the Serb has been his stance against the COVID vaccine. Nobody seems to be able to stop talking about it. He isn't allowed to play the US Open because of this, and John McEnroe doesn't think that this is fair at all. Let's get into the details of it. First up, John McEnroe's comments. As per the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention (CDC) guidelines, no unvaccinated foreigners are allowed to enter the country right now. These rules have been in place for almost a year, and after the disaster we saw during the pandemic, it kind of makes sense too. Unless you're Novak Djokovic, of course, or one of the people protesting his ban from the final slam of the year. The only one to speak up against the Serbs' absence is the one and only McEnroe. So we know the American doesn't really shy away from speaking his mind, and in a recent interview, he said that the 21-time Grand Slam champion's exclusive was a joke. Now, he did say that if he was in a position, he would have just gotten vaccinated to play. But clearly, Nole's got some very strong beliefs, and people need to respect that. McEnroe stated that we're 2.5 years into the pandemic, and we know enough to know that the idea of the Serb not being allowed to travel to play was a joke. But then again, resisting a jab that over 5 billion people have got also sounds like a joke, especially when you so clearly want to play, but maybe that's just us. Next up, this isn't the first time this is happening. You'd think after a whole year of this, Nole and his team would know better. Earlier this year, the Serb was deported from Australia after his medical examination against the vaccine didn't check out. Now, that wasn't without any drama either, and he was kept in the country for a few years, and after lots of legal battles back and forth, he had to return back home without having a chance to defend his title. Back then, not many people spoke out in favor of him, but some still did. For instance, Nick Kyrgios, who until that point had been very critical of the Serb's personality and politics, criticized his own country's decision to remove Nole. He said that it made him sound like he was a threat to public health when it just wasn't true. Now, Nole himself says he doesn't need the vaccine because he's one of the healthiest people in the world. And like, COVID isn't that serious. He'll be fine if he gets it. And yeah, sure, he will be. But what if he comes into contact with someone who's got a weakened immune system? We shouldn't have to get into the details of it, but we've all heard too many unfortunate stories of people coming into contact with the virus despite taking all precautions, and it's had deadly consequences. Well, Nole isn't an immediate threat to public health. He cannot expect the rules to be changed for him so he can be allowed to play a game. Plus, if he really was that desperate to play, he had months and months to change his mind. Also, he's missed tournaments in the United States before. We don't understand why this came as such a big shock to people. Earlier this year, Nole missed the Indians Wells and Miami Open because of his vaccination status. As these rules have been in place for a while now, it seems ridiculous that people expected him to somehow end up playing. Like, what did you guys think was going to happen? Of course, some people literally started petitions saying he should be allowed into the country, and like some people said, Kim, there's no people dying. The only reason Novak Djokovic isn't playing in the US Open is because of his own stubbornness. There are no other conspiracies against him. It's very simple. He's just living with the consequences of his own actions. The rules will change when the time is right, but at the moment, it's just what it is. And McEnroe thinks Nole isn't done just yet. Now, that's something we can all agree on. Granted, this year hasn't been the best for the Serb. He's still far from done. We mean, the guy literally won Wimbledon, and people are calling it a bad season for him. It just shows the very high standard he's set. It's almost certain that Nole would have won the Aussie Open if he wasn't deported. The same argument can be made for New York too. He's done it too many times before, and so his stubbornness has harmed him the most, more than anybody else. But it's okay, he's going to be just fine. McEnroe also talked about how Federer, Nole, and Nadal were already above everybody else. And he's right. They've been top of the game for decades now. Now, Rafa has benefited from Nole's politics the most, as he's won the first slam of the year in his absence, and Roger's been away from the game for too long. So, of course, missing these slams will have a long-term impact on the Serb, but who's to say he can't do it for another 2 years? McEnroe pointed out that Nole winning 3 or 4 more majors wasn't impossible at all. He even said that he can still make it 25. Moving on to the mental toll aspect. He did mention that all this drama must have worn on him mentally. He talked about his deportation from Australia and said that it took him a few months to get his head right. And now training every day for a few weeks, not knowing whether he was going to play in New York, must have impacted his mental health. But we know how well Novak Djokovic does when he's down. It's crazy, and so rest assured, you know he's gonna be back and he's gonna be better than ever. He's made it clear that his personal beliefs are most important to him anyway, so he'll stay away from the game if he has to, come back on his own own terms, and whenever he does, he's gonna be great. Now let's move on to some other related news. So here is Dan Evans on Novak Djokovic. Leading up to the US Open, everybody's talking about the one man who isn't there. In a recent interview, Dan Evans said that it was a disappointment that Nole was absent. He said that he understood the rules, but it was still a shame. He also pointed out that unvaccinated American players were still allowed to play. Dan said that Djokovic would have added something to the tournament, and he wasn't aware if the 21-time champ had been trying his best to make it to the tournament or not. The Brit said that it would have been nice to see him in New York. He even stated that players like Rafa would want him there too, so that if he ends up winning the tournament, he can claim that he did it in the best way possible. Well, that's one way to look at it. Next up, Daniil Medvedev on Novak Djokovic. Even the world number one is disappointed that the Serb isn't there. Medvedev said that he would have been a top favorite to win the title. He admitted that he wished he was playing. He also talked about Wimbledon, where he showed up and won despite not playing many tournaments this season. Danny said that his rivalry with Rafa was also heating up, and it was a pity that the Serb wasn't going to be there. He mentioned that it would have been a great story for the sport. The Russian also stated that he completely understood the US rules too. It's no surprise that the tournament will miss the 21-time Grand Slam champion, but it's nice to hear players step up and admit it to the public. And lastly, John McEnroe on Rafa Nadal. With Novak Djokovic missing, all eyes are on the Spaniard. It almost feels like everybody's fully expecting him to win in New York, that any other result would feel wrong. Nothing else could happen, right? His main two rivals are missing, and if his fitness stays top-notch, it's hard to see anybody stopping him, and McEnroe agrees. The American stated that he believed that Rafa could win the US Open, just like he won the Australian Open earlier this year. He said that the Spaniard has a good chance of claiming another major here, maybe more of a chance than anybody else even. He definitely called him one of the favorites. McEnroe said that he was losing track of how many majors he'd already won. What was one more? He also reminded everybody that you could never write the 22-time Grand Slam champ off, and hardly anybody can disagree here. It's Rafa Nadal's Grand Slam to lose. That's a wrap for this video. Do you think these rules have been unfair to Novak Djokovic, or should he have just gotten the vaccine? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.